She had carried that crown for 27 years without ever dropping it once, through segregation and civil rights marches, through the deaths of legends and the rise of pretenders, through disco and new wave and the synthesizer age, through marriages that broke her open and albums that rebuilt her. Aretha Louise Franklin had held the title of Queen of Soul with the kind of grip that doesn't come from pride, it comes from survival, earned in blood and gospel and midnight and grief. And then, on a Tuesday evening in the spring of 1985, sitting in the fourth row of a theater she wasn't even supposed to be at, she felt the ground shift beneath her feet. She was watching a 21-year-old girl from Newark, New Jersey open her mouth and rearrange the air in the room. If you haven't subscribed yet, hit that button right now, because what happened next is one of the most extraordinary moments in the entire history of American music, and we're just getting started. To understand what Aretha Franklin felt that night, you first have to understand what she had built and what it had cost her. Aretha grew up in Detroit, the daughter of the Reverend C.L. Franklin, a Baptist preacher so powerful that his sermons were pressed onto vinyl and sold across the country. The church wasn't just where Aretha sang. The church was where Aretha breathed. It was where she learned that a voice wasn't an instrument. It was a confession. It was a wound made audible. By the time she was 14, she was recording gospel music. By 18, she had signed with Columbia Records and was being reshaped, repackaged, told to smooth out the rough edges of her sound for a mainstream audience that wasn't ready for what she actually was. Those years were artistically suffocating. Then came 1967, Atlantic Records, producer Jerry Wexler, and a song called I Never Loved a Man. The moment that record hit the airwaves, everything changed. There was a sound coming out of American radios that nobody had quite heard before. It wasn't just R&B, it wasn't just gospel, it wasn't just pop. It was all three at once, unified by a voice that sounded like it had been crying for 40 years and had finally decided to sing about it instead. Respect, Chain of Fools, Natural Woman, Think. In 18 months, Aretha redefined what American music could be. She won the Grammy for Best Rhythm and Blues Recording 8 consecutive years, a record that still stands. In 1968, Time magazine put her on the cover in an era when black women almost never made that cover for anything. She wasn't just a great singer. She was a statement. She was proof. But all of that came at a price that most people never saw. Aretha Franklin was performing for her life every single time she stepped onto a stage, because she understood something that most artists never fully grasp. When you carry a crown that big, the moment you stop being extraordinary, somebody comes to take it from you. She had watched it happen to others. She had outlasted them all. By 1985, Aretha was 43. She had reinvented herself multiple times, fought through personal tragedy that would have silenced a lesser artist, and proven she could adapt to the synthesizer era without losing her soul. She had, against all odds, remained the queen. But Aretha Franklin was also a realist, a woman with bone-deep understanding of what greatness sounds like, and the honesty to recognize it even when it threatened everything she had built. Whitney Elizabeth Houston had every possible advantage and every possible burden. Her mother was Cissy Houston, the gospel singer who had sung backup for Elvis Presley, for Aretha Franklin herself, for Van Morrison. Her godmother was Dionne Warwick. She had been baptized in the kind of musical environment most artists would have killed for. But those advantages were also a set of impossible expectations. By the time Whitney was a teenager singing in the New Hope Baptist Church choir in Newark, people weren't just saying she was good. They were saying she was chosen. And that word, chosen, is the heaviest word you can put on a young person's shoulders. It means every performance is a debt you owe the room before you even open your mouth. Whitney could hear the whispers. She could feel the comparisons forming before she even opened her mouth. Her mother, her godmother, her cousin. She was the next one, the heir apparent, and that designation followed her like a shadow from the moment her voice started revealing the instrument underneath. It was a voice that didn't make sense. Most singers have to choose between power and control, between raw emotion and technical precision, between gospel heat and pop accessibility. Whitney Houston, from the very beginning, refused to choose. She had the lung capacity of a woman twice her age, the pitch control of a classically trained soprano, the emotional instinctiveness of someone raised in the pew, and the pop sensibility of someone who had grown up listening to everything. Clive Davis heard her sing at a New York club in 1983 when she was just 19 years old. He signed her that same night. I knew in the first 30 seconds, Davis would say later, I didn't need to hear the rest of the song. But the road to that stage was not a smooth one. There were conversations, polite ones, careful ones, about whether Whitney's gospel instincts needed to be softened for mainstream radio. Whitney listened. She smiled in the right meetings. And then she went into the recording studio and sang the way she was going to sing, and there was nothing anyone could do about it. Her debut album came out in February 1985 and produced 3 number-one singles by summer. She wasn't just successful, she was undeniable. The theater that Tuesday evening was a private industry showcase, the kind of intimate event where established artists sometimes appeared without fanfare, watching the next generation announce itself. Aretha had not planned to be there, but what everyone who was present agrees on is this. Aretha Franklin was not the kind of woman who showed up out of obligation. If she was there, she wanted to be there. Whitney took the stage in a simple gown. No elaborate production, no dancers, no theatrical lighting rig, just a microphone stand and the band behind her. She opened with something warm, a mid-tempo number that got the room settled. Let her establish the groove. Aretha watched from the fourth row with the detached professionalism of someone who has seen 1,000 performances. Her expression was unreadable. Then Whitney shifted gears. She went into a ballad, a song about loss, about love that doesn't come back, about the kind of heartbreak that settles into your bones and stays there. It was the kind of song that either destroys a singer or reveals them. And Whitney Houston, 21 years old and barely 2 years into her professional career, revealed herself completely. She started in the lower register, which caught the room off guard because most young singers stay safely in the middle of their range. Whitney went low first, low and slow and aching. She built a foundation. She let the words breathe. She let the silence between phrases do actual work. And then she began to rise, not in a showy way, not with the acrobatic over-singing that would plague years to come, as lesser talents tried to imitate what they didn't understand. This was not runs for the sake of runs, not technical display. This was meaning, each note carrying its full emotional weight, each phrase leading somewhere that you felt before you could understand it intellectually. By the time Whitney hit the second verse, the room had gone completely still. People had stopped making eye contact with each other. They had stopped checking their watches. They were just there, present, arrested. But it was what happened in the final third that stopped Aretha Franklin cold. Whitney had been building the whole time, slowly, deliberately, the way a storm builds before anyone realizes it has become dangerous. And then she opened up. She let it all the way out. Not a scream, not a shout, but something that existed in a register beyond technique. A sound that bypassed every critical faculty in the room and went straight into the chest. People flinched. Literally flinched. The way you flinch when something beautiful is so large, it becomes almost unbearable. In the fourth row, Aretha Franklin had stopped blinking. She would later describe what she heard that night with a specificity that only someone who truly understands the mechanics of greatness could provide. Most singers put the song in their voice, Aretha said quietly years later. Whitney put her voice inside the song. There is a difference, and most people who haven't done it themselves can't hear it. But I heard it. She paused for a long moment. That's what I spent 30 years trying to do. What happened after the showcase is the part of this story that most people have never heard. Aretha Franklin did not leave quietly. She did not slip out the side door and process what she'd witnessed alone in the back of a car. She did the thing that only the truly great are capable of doing. The thing that requires more courage than almost any act of performance. She went backstage. The room was the usual controlled chaos of post-show congratulations and handshakes. Whitney was surrounded by handlers and well-wishers, radiant in that particular combination of exhaustion and electricity that looks like nothing else in the world. And then Aretha Franklin walked through the crowd. People stepped aside. They always stepped aside for Aretha, not because anyone told them to, but because there are human beings whose presence changes the gravitational pull of a room, and Aretha Franklin was one of them. She walked directly to Whitney and took both of the younger woman's hands in hers. Whitney's eyes went wide, not starstruck exactly, but something closer to recognition. The daughter recognizing the mother, the student recognizing the teacher. Except that what moved between these two women traveled in both directions simultaneously. Aretha looked at Whitney for a long moment. Then she said, "You did something tonight that I spent 30 years trying to learn how to do. And you did it like you were born knowing it." The room around them had gone quiet. People were pretending not to listen while absolutely listening. Whitney started to deflect, to offer the standard gracious response. The "I learned everything from you" that would have been both sincere and expected. But Aretha wasn't finished. "Don't do that," Aretha said gently. "Don't minimize it. I'm not being kind to you. I'm telling you the truth because you deserve the truth." She held Whitney's gaze with the full weight of everything she had survived. "What you have is yours. Own it completely. Don't let anyone, not the industry, not the press, not the comparisons, talk you out of what you just did on that stage. I carried this for 30 years. Tonight I watched you carry it like it weighed nothing." There were tears in Whitney's eyes by the time Aretha finished speaking. And what happened next was something that none of the people crowded into that backstage room would ever forget. Aretha Franklin smiled, not the performative smile of someone graciously accepting defeat, but the rare full smile of someone who has found the exact right place to put down something very heavy. And she pulled Whitney Houston into an embrace that lasted a long time. Two women in a crowded room, one handing over something she had carried her entire adult life, the other receiving it without fully understanding what she was holding, or how much it would demand of her, or what it would ultimately cost. The recording industry remembered that night for a long time, not because of anything said publicly or documented officially, but because the people in that room walked out knowing they had watched something that only happens once in a generation. The moment when greatness recognizes greatness, when a queen points at her successor not with resentment, but with something that looks unmistakably like relief.